I don't need a kid who just spends money." To my astonishment, that was what John blurted out while his own son was desperately fighting his illness. Beside him, Linda was holding her stomach and laughing vulgarly. At that moment, I decided to give up on them. "Then, I will adopt your child, as his grandmother." "Go ahead." "Well, he's probably going to kick the bucket soon." "Don't come crying to me when you've spent all the money on medical bills. And don't have enough for the funeral." Linda said this and laughed loudly. I was boiling with anger. "You two, please don't contact us anymore. From now on, we are strangers."
Yeah.
"Fine by me." Without telling the two of them what Ken's doctor had told me, I drove out my eldest son and his wife. They will regret this in the future. With a feeling close to certainty, I gently embraced Ken. "My name is Susan. I am a 65-year-old housewife. My husband passed away 8 years ago, and now I live alone. It would be a lie to say I'm not lonely, but I've gotten used to this loneliness over time. I worked until 2 years ago, so with my retirement fund, my late husband's inheritance, and my pension, I lead a modest but stable life. I have one son with my husband. My eldest son, John, is 35 and I don't even know if he has a girlfriend. He doesn't seem to have any intention of getting married or holding down a steady job. Just drifting around. After graduating from university, he seemed to have trouble with his boss at his first job, and quit within 2 months of joining. After that, John would get a job and then quit soon after, and I even had to take over his debts. When my husband was alive, he would criticize John for his incompetence. But after my husband passed away, John stopped coming home. In my husband's will, John was only left with the compulsory portion of the inheritance, which probably didn't sit well with him. Honestly, I don't even know what he's doing now or where he's living. I do feel a sense of responsibility for the current state of my child, whom I raised with care. But I believe I provided enough financial and emotional support until he graduated from college. Therefore, I don't think I need to be responsible for him as an adult." Suddenly, John came home. Seeing John for the first time in 3 years, he looked emaciated and had a rough appearance. His clothes were overly flamboyant, and in this area surrounded mostly by cornfields. His Hawaiian shirt stood out oddly. "I got married." "What? What do you mean?" I was confused. Seeing my confusion, John clicked his tongue in annoyance and then called out to the car he arrived in. "Hey, come out already." "Okay. Just a minute." A woman, as flamboyantly dressed as John, emerged from the car with a shrill voice. I was shocked to see a child toddling behind her. "What? What's going on?" "Well, we have a kid and it's hard to move around, you know? We're short on cash too, so I came back home." John said this while yawning, and I was filled with disbelief. The child in front of me looked to be about 2 years old. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl, perhaps due to the uncut hair. But the child somewhat resembled John when he was young. "We're going to live here from today." "Hello Susan, I'm Linda." "Nice to meet you." Linda said this and quickly passed by me to enter the house. The child was trying hard to follow her, but Linda never looked back. Seeing this, I couldn't bring myself to turn John and his family away. I stopped my eldest son and his wife, who were about to leave right after dropping off their luggage, and made them explain their situation. John started dating Linda soon after my husband's death, and she quickly became pregnant. By the time they realized the pregnancy, there was no choice but to have the child. They did, but the expenses were more than they expected. So they ran out of money and came to my house. Even though they say they have no money, they both seem to have enough for their own clothes and entertainment. It seems they just don't want to spend money and effort on the child. Such irresponsibility. What can I say? The kid doesn't talk, costs a lot, and is just a nuisance. To hear such terrible things said about his own child in front of me. I was shocked, and even more so when I saw Linda agreeing with him. Well, that's the situation. It's a grandmother's duty to love her grandchild, right? We're counting on you. Okay, Susan, we're going to have a drink near the station. Come on, Ken, stay with Grandma. Saying this, they left to drink, ignoring my attempts to stop them. It takes about 20 minutes by car to the station. It's not a distance you can walk. In this rural area, I'm not even sure if there's a taxi service. And I can hardly believe they would use such a service to come back. Ken. When I called his name, my grandson Ken gave me a cute smile. His smile was just like John's. I smiled back at Ken, feeling my heart tighten. I vowed in my heart to protect this child from now on. Ken is a smart boy and quickly learns whatever I teach him. On his 3rd birthday, I was so fond of him, speaking fluently more than other children his age. However, my eldest son and his wife never showed any interest in Ken's growing up, treating him even more poorly. Neither John nor Linda seemed to have any intention of working. And they didn't contribute to the living expenses. They went out drinking every day, often not returning home for 2 or 3 days. It seemed normal for Ken. He wouldn't approach them more than necessary. And always seemed to be watching their expressions. I couldn't stand it and appealed to Linda. Linda, as a mother, you should spend more time with Ken. Susan, what are you talking about? You're the one looking after him, aren't you? I'm busy, you know? Linda said this without even looking at me, applying her nail polish. What does she mean by busy? She's just wandering around every day, and even now, she's only doing what she wants. I held back my urge to shout and pleaded again. Ken is just 3 years old. He must be longing for his mother. Seriously, I'm not into that sort of thing. Look, I never wanted to be a mother. Oh, maybe we should have him call you a mom instead. What are you saying? Just kidding, scary. I must have been furious, probably looking like a wrathful deity. But Linda, never seriously confronting me, went out for drinks with John that day as well. Ken acted as if nothing had happened, repeatedly opening and closing his picture book. Occasionally, he pointed at his favorite fish pictures and named them in his cute, lisping voice. It was my solace. However, the thought of Ken's future relationship with my eldest son and his wife gave me a headache. Fortunately, my husband's inheritance was sufficient to provide Ken with a good education. I need to make a decision. I muttered to myself, praying at the family altar. I felt as if my husband in the photo was supporting me, and I nodded firmly. 3 years later, I had still endured living with my eldest son and his wife. They continued their irresponsible lifestyle, routinely taking money from my wallet. As usual, I was the one taking care of Ken, and by that time, the communication between him and my son's family was virtually non-existent. Just before he was to start elementary school, a tragedy befell Ken. Are you Ken's grandmother? Please come to the hospital immediately. I received that call from the kindergarten while on my way back from picking up the adoption paperwork from the city office. Over these 3 years, I had been accumulating evidence of my caregiving and visiting the city office numerous times. And just when I was finally ready to separate Ken from my eldest son and his wife, I wondered what had happened to him. I rushed to the largest hospital in the area. I was told Ken would need to be hospitalized, and I clung to the doctor in desperation. What happened to Ken? I'm sorry, I'll explain the details when his parents arrive. The doctor said this, But when I saw the expression on the approaching nurse, I had a bad feeling. The nurse nodded to me and then whispered something to the doctor. What? They have no interest in hearing their child's diagnosis. The doctor's words echoed in the hospital. I sighed, realizing that this was the expected outcome. Then, I explained our family's situation to the doctor. The doctor was initially skeptical. But after hearing the nurse's testimony that my eldest son and his wife had no intention of coming, and seeing my caregiving records, he seemed to believe me. The doctor led me to a room and explained Ken's condition. Please stay calm. We've found cancer in Ken's kidneys. That can't be. Shocked, I fell off my chair. The pain of hitting the floor was nothing compared to the terrifying reality of the disease festering inside Ken's small body. A nurse rushed to help me up, and the doctor continued talking. Fortunately, there's no sign of metastasis. Immediate surgery can save him. Really? Yes, but we need consent from his parents. In children, the disease can progress quickly. Even waiting a month can significantly worsen his condition. We want to explain this and proceed with surgery as soon as possible. I held my head in despair. I couldn't imagine those two coming to the hospital to listen to the explanation for Ken's sake. Despite my worries, I decided to video call Ken before going home. I was met with a shocking words. Hey, you have cancer. I overheard Mom talking with the doctor just now. You're not going to last long. Don't be too stubborn, it'll cost more in medical bills. My vision turned red with rage. Ken heard his parents' words with a cold gaze. Despite their initial flinch at his mature look, John and Linda soon smirked vulgarly. Really, you're just a money-eater. The real money-eaters are you two. I shouted at them. John was slightly surprised by my anger, but then turned his nasty smile towards Ken. I don't need a kid who just spends money. Astonishingly, that was what John blurted out while his own son was desperately fighting his illness. Beside him, Linda was holding her stomach and laughing vulgarly. At that moment, I decided to give up on them. Then, I will adopt your child, as his grandmother. Go ahead. Well, he's probably going to kick the bucket soon. Don't come crying to me when you've spent all the money on medical bills. And don't have enough for the funeral. Linda said this and laughed loudly. I was boiling with anger. You two, please don't contact us anymore. From now on, we are strangers.
Yeah.
Fine by me. Without telling the two of them what Ken's doctor had told me, I drove out my eldest son and his wife. They will regret this in the future. With a feeling close to certainty, I gently embraced Ken. I told Ken everything about his cancer and the surgery, without hiding anything. I assured him not to worry about the money and asked him to undergo the surgery. I want you to live, Ken. We have 2 kidneys so that we can manage with one. The surgery will be tough, and there will be hard times, but Grandma will be with you. Grandma, I'll be okay. I'll do my best for you too. Despite the heartless words from his own parents, I hugged Ken tightly as he forced a smile. I then discussed the adoption with him. Although Ken was hesitant, he agreed. That night, I brought up the adoption to my eldest son and his wife, who were having a drinking party at the house. They had always said they didn't want a child who cost money. So, I decided to give them a severance payment on the condition that they never approach me or Ken again. And then I kicked them out. When I handed them an envelope with a considerable amount of money, they readily agreed the adoption. Then, in high spirits, they left the house quickly. They didn't say a word of concern for Ken the entire time. While this pained me, I also felt relieved that one source of Ken's suffering was gone. Ken's surgery was soon performed and was a success. Thanks to his youth, He recovered quickly and was soon able to be discharged. Thank you for everything. If anything happens, come back immediately. Yes. Ken, who had become quite friendly with the doctor, hugged him and thanked him. Back home, lying in bed, Ken spoke to me. Grandma, thank you so much. I became your parent, so this is natural. Don't worry about it, just rest well today. Okay. While Ken slept soundly, I received a call from the hospital on my mobile. Maybe we left something behind. I decided to answer the phone. Sorry to bother you, but there's someone from a TV station who wants to meet Ken. Someone from a TV station? I was puzzled. It turned out that a writer, who had come for an interview during Ken's hospital stay, had become friendly with him and had posted their story online. It turns out that the story had caused a huge reaction, and now there's talk of making it into a movie. They had talked about it when I wasn't around, so I was completely unaware. For the movie, we won't use Ken's real name, and of course, he won't appear in it himself. But since he's the model for it, I think people will recognize it's about him. I see. I'll check with Ken about it. I said this and ended the call for a moment. When Ken woke up and I told him about the movie, his eyes sparkled with excitement. My story is going to be a movie and everyone will see it. Yes, but they plan to hide your real name. Why? It's okay. Let them use my real name. Really? Surprised, I saw Ken smiling broadly. Because I want everyone to know how proud I am of my grandma. Ken. I couldn't stop my tears at Ken's sweet words. That day's meal tasted very salty, but I felt extremely happy. Eventually, the movie was made using a pseudonym, but Ken's name was mentioned as the model. The movie was a huge hit. The story of a brave grandmother and her clever grandson living and helping each other. Even knowing I was the model, moved me to tears. Ken became quite sought after, attending online seminars during school holidays. He was eager to encourage children battling cancer, so I supported him fully. We received a lot of money from his appearances. And before I knew it, Ken's bank account had grown to an amount he couldn't spend in a lifetime. With this, he could afford treatment if he fell ill again and focus on his studies even if I wasn't around. I thought so and kept his savings safely. Then, one day, about 4 years later, my eldest son and his wife visited our home. Apparently, they had lost a lot of money gambling and were in debt. Seeing Ken, they grinned with a lecherous smile. Ken has grown so much. Aren't you missing your mom and dad by now? Right. We raised you, so you owe us a debt of gratitude, don't you? My son and his wife, who abandoned Ken as soon as they found out about his illness, were shamelessly demanding. However, Ken looked at them with a cold gaze and then spoke. Who are you? This left John and Linda momentarily speechless, twitching at the corners of their mouths. I held back my laughter and stood between Ken and my eldest son and his wife. Excuse me, but who might you be? Do you have some business with my son? Huh? I'm your son, aren't I? Isn't this kid your grandson? I met John's claim with a cold gaze, just like Ken. John, momentarily taken aback, soon started to fawn over Ken. Hey, Dad's in trouble. I lost big at the horse races. Please, just a little help. How about just 5 million? 5 million. I involuntarily raised my voice. Even if it's gambling debt, 5 million is an excessive amount. Despite my husband and I repeatedly warning against gambling and debt, it clearly didn't resonate with John. That money is the reward for Ken's hard work in giving lectures. He had to share his painful experiences openly. It's not for you to use for your entertainment. I said this and shut the door right in John's face. My eldest son and his wife were shouting something, but when I called the police, They arrived promptly, and soon it was quiet. However, not ready to give up, the next morning around 5 a.m. my eldest son and his wife stormed our house again. Mom, I've changed my heart. So let me back in the house. Ken? It's Mom. I'll take good care of you from now on. So please let us in. The two continued knocking on the door. Hearing the noise, Ken, who had been eating breakfast, sighed and headed towards the entrance. But the sound of the door opening never came. Worried, I went to see what was happening. Ken was looking down at my eldest son and his wife through a small window, slightly off from the entrance. He then spoke to them, unaware that they were still knocking on the door. Okay, I'll give you some questions. If you answer even one correctly, I'll let you live with us. What, that's all? You're still a kid after all. Go ahead, ask anything. I could hear John's cheerful voice. Ken thought for a bit and then posed the first question. What are my favorite and least favorite foods? Hey, Linda, you know, right? John immediately seemed unsure and turned to Linda. Linda thought for a moment and then answered in a cloying voice. I know, of course. Your favorites are chiffon cake and pudding. And you hate bell peppers, right? I sighed quietly so that my eldest son and his wife couldn't hear. Ken gave me a troubled smile and then looked outside the window again. Is that your final answer? Yes. How can a mother not know her child's likes and dislikes? Linda's voice was full of confidence. Ken then burst out laughing. I could imagine the confused faces of my eldest son and his wife outside the door. After laughing for a while, Ken spoke to Linda. Wrong. What? But you loved eating cake. That was Dad, not me. I have an egg allergy and still don't like eggs, even though it's gotten better. So, I don't eat egg-rich cakes or pudding. The cake I enjoyed was the egg-free cake Grandma made. And I like bell peppers. My least favorite is whipped cream. But, in fact, Linda had only given Ken the cheapest retort porridge and bread until they came to our house. It's surprising Ken managed to stay healthy. But it was thanks to the meals at the daycare he attended at that time. The director of the daycare had quickly noticed Ken's situation and changed his meals to allergy-friendly ones, closely monitoring his health. When Linda was warned that if the situation continued, it would be reported to the Child Welfare Services, she withdrew Ken from the daycare the next day and ended up staying at our house. That was the background up until now. How could I possibly know that? We've been apart for years. Okay, next question. When is my birthday? Actually, today is Ken's birthday. A parent shouldn't forget their child's birthday. However, my eldest son and his wife didn't seem to be able to answer. What's wrong? It's an easy question. I know it, right, John? When Linda called John's name, he replied in a flustered manner, of course. But still, they couldn't answer. If you don't know, just say so. About 5 minutes passed, and Ken said this quietly. I could feel his sadness, and my heart ached. We know it. Just momentarily forgot. That's all. Right. Just slipped my mind. Can you give us a hint? Frustrated by their ridiculous excuses, Ken laughed loudly, but there were tears in his eyes. I stood next to him and held his hand. He was surprised, but when he looked at me, he nodded firmly and wiped his tears. Then faced my eldest son and his wife. It's strange that real parents need a hint for their child's birthday. Well, it's no surprise. You two never celebrated my birthday anyway. What? How can you be so disrespectful after I gave birth to you? You should be grateful just for that." As Linda became enraged, Ken looked at her coldly. She was taken aback by his gaze and fell silent. "Okay, last question, and it's an easy one." Ken then asked the final question. "What organ was affected when I had cancer?" Indeed, it was an easy question. It has been explained several times on TV. Even if my eldest son and his wife hadn't been interested at the time. Given how much it was discussed, they should have known. But they completely defied my expectations. Huh? Wasn't it the heart? It's the stomach, right? I was taken aback by their response. I finally understood that these two really had no interest in Ken. I expected Ken to be shocked, but to my surprise, he was smiling. "Thanks, that helped me get over it." "What?" My eldest son and his wife seemed confused by Ken's smile. Ken's smile was bright, but his eyes were not laughing. "The cancer was in my kidneys. You claim to be my parents, but you really have no interest in me. My real parent is here, Susan, not you. After all we've done giving birth to you, you don't plan to be filial. That's why I said my parent is Susan." "Oh, there comes your ride. Please don't come again." Ken said this and abruptly closed the window. I could hear my eldest son and his wife shouting from the other side of the door. But soon the police arrived and quieted them down. I was concerned about Ken's feelings, but he let out a sigh of relief and smiled at me. "What I said to them just now, I meant it. I've always been too shy to say it, but I've always wanted to call you Mom. Is that okay?" "Yes, of course." Overwhelmed with happiness, I cried and hugged Ken. He said, "It's hard to breathe, Mom," but hugged me back. At the police station, my eldest son and his wife claimed that I had brainwashed Ken and that they were the victims, having their beloved son taken from them. The police firmly denied the claims of my eldest son and his wife after seeing the evidence from the daycare and the care records I had submitted to the city office. They called me to confirm, but it was clear they were frustrated with my eldest son and his wife, who were seeking help even at this point. After that call, Ken went to the police station alone to say his final goodbyes. He returned with a refreshed expression, having revealed everything they had done to him. I said my final goodbyes. I also exposed everything they did to me. They'll probably be behind bars for a while now. Ken showed me the data he had shown to the police. It contained footage of my eldest son and his wife committing theft and accepting money from a man. It turned out they planned to keep Ken with them, live off his royalties and other earnings, and even tried to sell him to someone involved in unsavory business practices. I turned pale when I learned of this plan. I couldn't believe my own son could plan something so horrific. Ken, sensing my shock, spoke apologetically. I asked my manager to look into it and found out about this. But I kept quiet because I was worried it would shock you too much. "I'm sorry." "It's okay. I can handle anything for your sake." It's scarier not knowing.
Yeah.
"I'm really sorry. But you're the only one who worries about me like that, so I want to protect you too." Ken said this shyly, and I couldn't help but cry tears of joy. He had matured beyond his 10 years. But his expression seemed age-appropriate, and my heart felt warmly content. Later, my eldest son and his wife were found guilty of numerous other crimes and sentenced to nearly a decade in prison. They never showed remorse, and the letters they sent, which the manager received on their behalf, still contained demands for gratitude for having given birth to Ken. Ken continues to visit hospitals to cheer up sick children. Even as a middle schooler entering adolescence, his honest and kind nature hasn't changed. He recently got a girlfriend and sneakily goes out on dates, which I watch with amusement. Thankfully, his cancer hasn't recurred, and his prognosis is good. He's able to live a normal life like his peers, though regular checkups are still necessary. As for me, I'm still doting on Ken. I might be a bit overbearing, but it's my life's joy. My current goal is to live long enough to see Ken get married and to attend his wedding. If I'm lucky, I'd love to see my great-grandchildren too. I've even started going to the gym to stay healthy. People are surprised at how energetic I am for my age. I plan to keep doing my best to be a proud mother for as long as possible.